Well, as you will already know by now, Scotland Yard and policing as a whole has hit yet another bump in the road. Although, to be fair, this bump was more like a sleeping policeman that the Met already sped over and crippled themselves on, as it comes as no surprise that the vast number of allegations against him, some 43 offences, all predatory offences against 13 women over an 18-year period. David Carrick has now recently admitted the degrading offences, of which I won't list here as I've already listed in previous videos, links in the description. Carrick subjected his victims to degrading and horrific assaults, using his position as a police constable to commit his crimes, only getting caught after he finally picked on the wrong woman, and instead of being too scared to come forward, she made the allegation of sexual assault and Carrick was arrested, and came to the end of his reign of terror. Carrick, along with the likes of Wayne Couzens, was attached to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Command Unit of the Metropolitan Police, and we've heard a lot recently about others who were either in that unit or have come from the Civil Nuclear Constabulary to join the unit, who have all been involved in talking about subjects such as rape. A court earlier this week, on Monday the 16th of January, heard that before one alleged attack on a woman in September 2020, Carrick from Stevenage in Hertfordshire flashed his police warrant card to make the woman feel safe. Sounds familiar. He bragged about guarding the Prime Minister and said his work nickname was Bastard Dave. No offence, but if someone came and told me that their nickname was Bastard Dave, I certainly wouldn't be putting myself in a position for them to be alone with me. It's not exactly a redeeming feature to be called a bastard by your work colleagues. Actually, I'm sure Couzens was referred to as Rapey McRapison, if my memory serves me correctly. And it seems the more disturbing the name you're nicknamed by colleagues, the more of a cunt you are. Other victims Carrick admits attacking were warned that if they spoke about him raping and sexually assaulting them, they would not be believed because he was police. Again, another line we hear all too often. The Met said it should have spotted the threat that Carrick posed to women during his time in the force from 2001, when he first passed the police force's vetting procedure. In 2009 he was given a gun, and despite the complaints already against him, he passed vetting again in 2017. And for those two failures alone, the Metropolitan Police should be held fully responsible for allowing this animal on the streets, and no apology, in my opinion, will be able to justify anything that the police do now. Carrick's offending has been described as unprecedented by the Met in its duration and nature. Barbara Gray, one of the Met's top brass officers, made a public video announcement, which I will play for you now, but not a thing that she says can ever reconcile for the fact that the police seem to have a knack for picking people off the streets who they think are guilty of something, but one of the people they spend the most time with manages to avoid that copper's nose they all talk about.
At the outset, I want to commend the outstanding bravery of the 13 women who came forward and reported the horrific crimes they were victims of. On behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service, I am truly sorry that they have suffered at the hands of this police officer. Carrick is a prolific serial sex offender who preyed on women over a period of many years, abusing his position as a police officer and committing the most horrific, degrading crimes. He has devastated women's lives. He has had a devastating impact on the trust and confidence of women and girls that we are working so hard to earn. He has devastated colleagues. Whilst much of his offending was not known to the Met, there was an escalation of abusive behaviours that should have been identified, and the matters have been referred to the IOPC. I would not expect anyone with his pattern of behaviour to be in the police service today.
This was not a mistake on behalf of the Metropolitan Police. I believe this was an intentional overlooking of the reports made against him simply because he was a copper. I'm not saying the Met let him do what he did, but they did allow him to continue doing what he was doing right under their noses after they had reports about him. They failed to act. They failed to carry out one of the core functions of the police to protect the public, and I personally don't think there is or will ever be any excuse the Met can give to exonerate themselves for this. No, not this, but the catastrophic failures that they keep finding themselves embroiled in. According to reports, Carrick had 14 complaints submitted to the Met and 3 other forces, including rape, domestic violence and harassment allegations. He had already been brought in for questioning 8 times in the last 10 years, but was left alone to carry on despite allegations of these depraved acts. Now, there is somebody who knew about this and hasn't said anything, I can guarantee that. So with the latest revelations, although I'm not quite sure why this wasn't ordered after Couzens' arrests, the National Police Chiefs Council has ordered that all forces are to double check their officers to find anyone who is simply not fit to wear the uniform. Although I have a feeling that many of those doing the check-in probably need checking themselves, and I wonder who's going to do that. The Home Office said that this will help identify anyone who has slipped through the net before vetting standards were toughened and ensure those who are unfit to serve can be rooted out. The government will do what it takes to root out misogyny and predatory behaviour from the ranks of the police. It appears that police vetting is far more lax than an investigation into someone who's used hurty words online, and it's a very frightening situation to be in, and also shows the bias across that thin blue line. Suella Braverman described Carrick's sickening crimes as a stain on the police and said he should never have been allowed to remain as an officer for so long. But he was, and there's no excuse for that. Mistakes, accidents, overlooks, this is the police, and none of that should even be accepted by the public as a reason that we have predators in the police. She added, we are taking immediate steps to ensure predatory individuals are not only rooted out of the force, but the vetting and standards are strengthened to ensure they cannot join the police in the first place. Although it's a bit late for that, really, isn't it? Sadiq Khan is said to be applying to the Home Office to get Carrick's £22,000 a year police pension stripped from him because his crimes were committed in connection with his role as a police constable, with Home Office Minister Robert Jenrick saying that the government supports Khan's efforts. However, Home Office current rules will make that unlikely to happen. But this again is too little too late, and is simply Khan using this situation to try and make himself look good. I would be asking why, if he's so bothered about stripping Carrick of his pension because the crimes were committed in connection with his job, why the hundreds of others whose crimes have been committed in connection with their jobs have been allowed to keep their pensions. Since Carrick's offences and guilty plea came out, the Metropolitan Police say that their abuse complaints hotline has received in excess of 700 calls in a single day about alleged sex and domestic violence committed by police, with other forces also receiving similar complaints. Carrick was complained about 9 times, according to reports, for allegations including the rapes, but he was allowed to remain in his role as a so-called protector of the public and a law enforcer. Former Metropolitan Police DCI Mick Neville said the conviction of PC David Carrick looks like being a Me Too moment for the police. No doubt other victims will come forward and expose those who abuse their powers. They can see the police officers are not above the law. Although that's a nice choice of words there from former DCI Mick Neville, it is of course utter horse shit, as they are generally above the law, and these latest revelations have proven it. If police were not above the law, then after the first, maybe second allegation against Carrick, he would have been suspended and his actions looked into. But because he was plod, his word was more than likely taken over that of the victim. This is not an isolated incident. Looking back through the channel, my reports prove that. However, all the focus will be on Carrick for some time, and although these processes are said to be being implemented, such as reinvestigating police who've had complaints and revamping the vetting process, there are many plod who will still be given the benefit of the doubt, along with the police in higher ranks who will not be reinvestigated, when even those higher ranks are in some cases just as dirty as the rest of them. Just look at the 3 senior officers from Gwent Police who were sacked for sexual misconduct last year. I've said it before and I'll say it again, without completely disbanding the police from the PCSO to the police commissioners and starting all over again, we will never be able to weed out all the predatory and violent filth that we have pretending to be wearing the uniform for the right reasons.